Welcome to the 44th episode of the GameFor podcast. In this episode, still recording from home and sponsored by Gaddis Gaming, we'll talk about how to keep gaming friendships and groups together. I'm Adam.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called MilkCan. And because most of the folks at MilkCan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. And I've been doing, we've both been doing tabletop gaming stuff recently. What have you been doing in your free time in between now and the last episode?
Yeah, so I'm finally getting back. So I'm still doing a few customer prints here and there, but started finally getting back to doing prints for myself. And as I started getting into it, realized that still had some issues left over from back early COVID when I was like printing face masks, face shields, parts, and stuff like that.
Yep.
Where, I was trying to print as fast as I could with, as little material as possible and a bunch of crazy stuff and tore up my machines. So this week, as I started printing out stuff and having issues, I decided this last weekend to basically tear apart the machines a little bit and redo stuff. One of my belts had started to come loose, so I basically created a new belt from parts I had and put that together, cleaned up stuff, put together a new resin, like the reservoir.
Yeah.
I've got a couple extra ones, but one of them has been out of commission for about a month because I accidentally poked holes in it because I used a sharp utensil, which I knew I shouldn't, but I was really annoyed with the failed print that was sticking and it wouldn't come off, and now it's off. But I had to basically undo and redo like 30 screws to put the new filter piece on it.
Oh, geez, yikes!
Yeah, but anyway, so they're up and running and actually running really, really well. Knock on wood. But so I've got printers that are running like brand new machines right now, which is super nice. So
yeah,
I'm getting back into some printing. Then this weekend I actually have 2 RPG sessions scheduled, so I haven't probably played any RPGs for it's been about 2 months.
oh wow. Well, I mean, the holidays is one thing.
Yeah, holidays and schedules just got really crazy, but now we're getting back into it. So I've got our normal Sunday D&D session that I run, which is the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And then Friday, trying out a new RPG called Troika. I believe that's how you pronounce
Russian.
it. Yeah. It's supposed to be kind of like a campy, fun little game. So from what I've read from the rules already, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Are you running that game, or?
I am not.
Okay.
My friend Nathan's going to be running that. So I get to just kind of generate a character and have fun.
Well, that's kind of nice, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Troika. No, I've not heard of that one. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So,
and you're doing these all still virtually, right?
Yep. We're mostly through Discord. Yep.
Like Roll20 and anything like that?
Roll20
or anything like that?
My normal one, we have a Roll20 account. I've been paying for that. It was just a lot easier to set things up, especially with the maps and everything else.
Oh yeah.
I started off even with like a non-paid one, and then like with scanned in maps and out of the book, and it was okay. But the amount of work that they put into for the paid version was worth the $20 or whatever I spent to get that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is it a monthly fee, or is it like a one-time or a yearly? Or how does that work?
The campaign itself was $20, and then I don't remember if I'm still paying for the monthly. So the monthly gives you like some extra features and stuff. Like dynamic lighting and everything else. I don't believe I'm paying for the extra anymore because we were having trouble with dynamic lighting until although since the last time we tried it, I went on a campaign with somebody that had more experience and showed me how to make that stuff work.
Mm,
And it's really cool once you get it working because it's like it's based on like your vision of your character, but then any kind of lighting sources and all those lighting sources and characters and all that use like the actual rules for how far the light is cast. And then
right.
like anything like pillars or any of that kind of or walls or doors all kind of stop the light in the right way. So it really kind of shows you what stuff your character could actually see and not see.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's cool. I think
Yeah.
that's a neat extra feature to have in something like Roll20. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just I still wish their UX was a little bit more friendly. Like I love all the features they have, but sometimes it's just it's a pain trying to find exactly what you need. So,
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Yeah, I think that well, yeah, UX is difficult to nail
hmm
down, and even when you
absolutely.
think you do, people have got different ideas of what it is, what user experience is, and
Exactly.
that kind of
Like there
stuff.
might be
So it's
there's probably some people who are like, "Oh, this is the best design app I've ever used."
right.
And for
Yeah,
me it's just
exactly.
not there.
Yeah,
So, but
there's a
that's
lot
okay cuz it
between there's a lot between like even cultural differences too, as far as
Oh,
user
yeah, yeah.
experience can be. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Definitely.
true.
But yeah, so I'm doing that, and then I've been helping our friend Lee at Gaddis Gaming
Hmm.
get the rest of his pledge manager figured out. He's using a service called GameFound, which
Okay.
since we started using it as a pledge manager until now, in between that they have now launched their whole like they're actually competing head to head with Kickstarter now.
Oh wow.
For like I think their first game that they launched, especially like as an official campaign run just on their platform, raised like $2 million.
Wow. So that's like a
Yeah,
competitor to Kickstarter then? GameFound
yeah,
is? Hmm.
yeah. So I was trying to figure out because like when we signed up for it, it was like this one is like a nice pledge manager,
Hmm.
but is not charging anything, and I was like, "There's got to be a catch here somewhere, right?"
Right. Yeah. Usually.
Nobody gives away anything for free, but I could not figure out what it was. Well, then, yeah, shortly after we started setting stuff up, that's when they all were like, "Oh, and by the way, we're now allowing you to run campaigns on here," and they're taking their cut there. So I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, that was they kind of backed into it and stuff to
Yeah.
really
So
get a
the
user base.
campaign manager stuff is almost a bit of a loss leader to some degree.
Exactly, and
Yeah. Yeah.
now it's just part of the. Now it's just like, oh, if you run your campaign, you automatically get this nice pledge manager versus Kickstarter doesn't have a really good way to do
Um,
that. You usually have to go
yeah.
third
Yeah.
party.
Yeah.
So
I wonder why they've not. I wonder why Kickstarter hasn't decided to make their own pledge manager.
I'm almost wondering. I think there's probably two caveats to that, right? There's
Hmm.
probably one is the depending on what you're selling, there's a lot of different ways you want the pledge manager to work. Where GameFound is kind of it seems like they're targeting the tabletop industry so that they can kind of target better of what people want.
Yeah, I mean, with a name like that, obviously, yeah, it's more for games and less for. I mean, Kickstarter can be for anything. Admittedly, there's a
Right.
lot of tabletop games on Kickstarter, but there's also a lot of tech things and all kinds of things
And
on Kickstarter.
stickers
So,
and books and
yeah, yeah.
movies and yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff or inventions.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm wondering if that, and then two, I think it's hard to make it so it's like easy to use. Where like I like Kickstarter, I think overall is pretty well done and easy to use. And I think the Pledge Manager, having just tried out with this stuff and then some other ones I was playing around with, like so far it looks like it's a lot of work to try to get it to work right.
Hmm.
Um, and then you also have to worry about like because Kickstarter's global. What kind of shipping do you work with and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so
Oh,
I'm
that's true
wondering if
too.
it's just hard for them to target that. But so
Yeah.
yeah, we're right now the only thing that's holding back the pledge manager. We're trying to get the shipping cost calculator figured out. That seems to be the difficulty right now. But I kind of thought I had it working, and then I did some tests this morning before he hit go live and found some major issues in it. So we're working with support to try to figure that out. But
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean, shipping right now is such a pain in general.
yeah,
It's difficult. So, um, yeah, no, I can understand that. Cool.
yeah. So how about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I have been, let's see. So, last night I streamed on Twitch. I normally stream on Twitch Monday nights and Friday mornings. And I finished up my, I'm working on an Adeptus Mechanicus kill team for Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team, the game Kill Team, which is this kind of small skirmish version of 40K. And so I've got infiltrators in that roster to build and or to paint, which I finished those guys up last night, and then I'll be probably this coming Friday start moving into the kind of smaller guys. The infiltrators are
Hmm.
kind of big, tall, skinny guys that are mostly robot, whereas the Vindicators, no, Vanguards, whatever they're called, something with a V, Vanguards, I think. The Vanguards, and there's one Ranger in that group, and they're a lot shorter. Still predominantly robot, but they're a lot shorter.
Hmm.
Um, and so I got those infiltrators done, and then I'm going to be doing the probably, like I said, probably starting on the Vanguards and the one. There's one Ranger in that group that I think I might start on probably on Friday. There's a slim chance I might start on something else, but I don't know what it would be right now. So yeah,
Nice.
but I am trying to decide what to do next on that. And then off screen, I had finished those zombies I talked about last episode for Zona
Yeah,
Alpha.
those came out really good. I like them.
Yeah, they were fun. They were a lot. They were like one of those projects where like it took them like I built them on and off for several days. And then I textured the base, and then on like a Saturday, actually I think I textured the base on Saturday and then primed them and gave them a black and white like Zenithal style highlight. And then on
Okay.
Sunday, sometime right after lunch, I sat down and started painting them, and I think I was done with them by I don't know, maybe dinner time roughly. So I didn't spend a ton of time on them, but they turned out kind of nice, and they're just kind of like for Zona Alpha, there's times when you will come across certain regions of the map that sometimes basically um, game run AI bad guys will pop up, so like you're playing a two-player game, let's say, and you're both trying to get like artifacts, alien artifacts and things like that off the board and whatnot, but sometimes as you're going over by an anomaly to check it out, maybe a swarm of rats will come out, or two swarms of rats, or
Okay.
maybe 1 to 8 zombies will come out, and so it's kind of a random thing, and so you want to have these models to show that. And then you either are going to have to fight the zombies or run away from the zombies and things like that. So I've been going through and looking into the book to see like what kind of little things here and there I need to add so that I have them available for those games. I actually picked up. I was like, where am I going to get rat swarms from? And I was thinking Reaper probably made something like that. And I was going to look for something like that and have to probably go online and order it. And I remembered that WizKids might do that too. And when I was at my local shop a couple of weeks ago, I popped my head in there for a little bit, and yeah, they've got a bunch of WizKids, those pre-primed models, and there is a rat swarm in there. So I bought a little blister pack that's got 2 rat swarms in it, and that'll cover me. So that's kind of nice to be able to kind of when you're playing
Yeah.
miniature agnostic games, part of the fun, at least to me, is going around and trying to figure out like what models will work, what can I use from different companies.
Hmm.
Kind of, again, you get a little bit of the cream of the crop because you get to pick the best stuff that you like from different companies.
Right. Well, and
But
it's fun
if
too
you're
because like there's some games that I really like the models, or there's a certain model I really like, but I'm not really interested in the game itself.
exactly, yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that part of it for me is also, I mean, like I kind of want to make things try to match a little bit. So there
Hmm.
are different styles of 3D sculpting that happen in different companies, and sometimes you have like a model that looks almost a little cartoony, and you have other ones that are much more kind of realistically proportioned and stuff like that. And so it's always been a
Yeah.
situation for me of like trying to find the right stuff to work with it and everything. And so yeah, that's been fun. So I'll be working on those rats as well soon. But then otherwise off Twitch, off stream, I've been working on some. I finally got a hold of the new plastic demons from second edition Frostgrave.
Oh,
So those
nice.
are those are made by North Star Minis, who made a bunch of other plastic minis for Frostgrave back when Frostgrave was first edition. There were the
Hmm.
soldiers, the cultists, the barbarians, there were like gnolls or kobolds or something. There was just a whole bunch of
Yeah.
different models that they made.
Right.
Even female soldiers as well. They eventually released, and I had bought. I think I own maybe 4 or 5 of those sets. I'm pretty sure I own soldiers, cultists, uh, barbarians. I think I own the the soldiers, and there's one of the creatures. Like I said, it's either gnolls or something like that. I think I own one
Yeah,
of
I
those
remember those
boxes as
coming.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so now I've got the demons, and they're kind of cool. They're like not. They're basically like demons, but like in armor. They're not, they're not huge or monstrous or have wings. They're
Oh,
basically
okay.
like humanoid. Sometimes they have hooves, sometimes they have claws, sometimes they have like regular feet.
Right, but they're susceptible to
Yeah.
damage, so they're
Yeah, but they've got armor, yeah, and they've got like, they've got
nice.
horns, but some of them look a little bit more almost goat-like and bestial that way, and other ones look a
Mm,
little bit more what we would think of as demon. But they're cool kits again, just like all of those kits for Frostgrave. They're very, very customizable. You've got swords and shields and maces and crossbows and all kinds of stuff like that. So, yeah, I built 5 of those for a project I'm working on, and I got to texture their bases next, and then I will start painting on them at some point too. So, and then
nice.
kind of lastly, I'm still working on terrain, and I've got a second Games Workshop Realm of Battle board. The Realm of Battle systems that they sell are, you buy this big box, and it has 6 2 foot by 2 foot plastic squares in it with texture and all kinds of stuff on it, and then you put those together modularly to make your board. And so I painted one, and I'm going to paint a second one. I'm really not going to use all 6 probably, because I don't particularly like, I'm not playing like big army style games anymore where you play on a
Mhm.
4x6 board. I'm predominantly playing smaller stuff. The normal size for Kill Team is 22 by 30 inches. So I'll be able to use 24 by 48 inches, and it will be maybe just a little bigger than normal, Kill Team. But we can certainly just, say, okay, well, you can kind of, with the width, it's not as big of a deal. 22 to 24, that's not that big of a deal. 30 to 48, that's 18 extra inches. So you cut that in half. So now we just decide to disregard 9 inches on each of the long sides, and it would be fine.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying it, and it's a totally different painting process when you're painting really big pieces of terrain, like 2 foot by 2 foot pieces of terrain, versus like even normal sized pieces of terrain. And then in comparison to models, it's a very different process. I'm using much larger brushes. I'm using cheap craft paints from like Joanne Fabrics and stuff like that. But it's working out okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Our friends at Gaddis Gaming want to thank their supporters for bringing their latest Kickstarter campaign, Empire Falls, to life. If you missed the Kickstarter or you want to add your pledge, a pledge manager, as we mentioned a little bit ago, will be coming very soon. And as an added thank you to all of our listeners, you can now get 10% off your entire purchase of World War I and World War II miniatures at Gaddis Gaming's website when you use the promo code GameFor. That is that is GAME and the number 4, all one word. Find out more about going to gaddisgaming.com. That is GADDISGAMING.com. And we will also have a link in the show notes. And thank you to Gaddis Gaming for sponsoring the GameFor podcast.
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
very much looking forward to. I saw there was a post today on the for the Kickstarter for that about the tanks
Oh, yeah.
going to production. The plastic tanks, they look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they'll
Yeah.
be resin,
I'm
I
excited
think.
for Yeah, I think I think they're mostly resin. I think
Hmm.
some parts might be pewter still a little bit too,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm
like
not
barrels and
positive.
stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about those. He's got the one I really like is he's got now, like, I bought the ball tank, and now there's like a pill
Hmm.
tank as well, which
Oh,
is kind
okay.
of like it's kind of like it, well, it looks like a pill. It's like the ball tank, but then
Like
has
the
like
ball,
a
but stretched out, like
yeah,
more
like
stuff in the
stretched out in the
middle.
middle. It's got more stuff. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think I did see a picture of that too. Yeah, no, I've got the ball tank as well. I like it quite a bit. Um, so the episode for this period, this fortnight, if you will, is
Hmm.
about. We had a question actually, kind of. We had some people ask some questions about what to do when your gaming club maybe falls apart, or that kind of stuff. And
Right.
we kind of thought about it maybe from a slightly different angle, and we were like, well, what about what how frequently, and it has happened to both to me, and I'm sure it's probably happened to you as well,
Hmm.
that there have been times when friendships have been tested by by gaming in some situations.
Right.
And sometimes it's something that happens due to the game. Sometimes it's something that happens due to the personalities involved, that kind of stuff. But so we wanted to talk about how to kind of keep gaming friendships and groups together, like how to work. Like we wanted to kind of identify, like, here's where the problems are sometimes, and what can we do to hopefully try to fix them. You know what I mean?
Hmm. exactly.
Have have you had? I'm like I said. Have you had issues like this in the past where people have?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We've had some. I don't know if any kind of like led to any kind of dramatic like chairs being thrown or anything crazy
Sure,
for
sure.
split up. But there's definitely been some where like you're like, oh yeah, we don't get together as a gaming group anymore, and it's probably because of this thing that happened. And
Hmm.
so you're like, because yeah, I've noticed that gamers aren't always confrontational.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of passive aggressive behavior that goes on, or just like
Hmm.
ghosting. Like, well, if I just stop going, then the problem's fixed, and I don't have to tell them that I'm not going, and I'm just always busy. So
Yeah. Now, let's be perfectly honest right up front here. If you're in a gaming group or a club or whatever, you're just maybe you stumbled into something like that. If you don't particularly like the people in the club, then it's difficult to kind of get that gaming experience to be positive to begin with. And you
right,
don't need to stay in a group of people that you don't like, whatever
exactly.
the reasons might be, admittedly.
Right,
But
right. We're not saying like, oh, once you join a group, you have made a commitment. You should
yeah,
always
you're
be with that
stuck with
group.
it. Yeah, no, absolutely,
No, no,
absolutely.
no. Sometimes
Yeah,
a divorce is better for the kids.
sure.
Like
Yeah. I mean, it's a situation where you have to like look at it and go, well, great. I now have a weekly schedule where I can play, Pathfinder with these folks. I found them maybe on the Game4 app, or maybe you found them through some other thing, or whatever the deal is. But I just don't like them, or whatever. Then it's difficult. You either are hoping to start liking them a little bit more later on down the road, or it's maybe time to just be like, I'm not enjoying this because I don't enjoy the company. You know what I mean?
right, exactly.
And then maybe you got to find a different group. So we're
Hmm.
right off the bat. I just want to let people know that this is not, this is how you have to, to stick with this group. But if you've been
Right,
in a group for a long time, or it's a group of friends who were friends before they got gaming and then they started gaming or something like that, like there's also those options, and you don't want a game to break up potentially a friendship that's been going on a lot longer than you've been playing the game and things like that. That kind of stuff is kind of what we're talking about here. We're also
hmm
talking about if you need to, like, I want to keep gaming with this group. I generally like them, but there's this thing that keeps happening that kind of seems to wedge us apart, and we don't want to go down that road. And then hopefully we can help you with that kind of stuff as well.
yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So like,
So
yeah, so
yeah, what
we're gonna
causes groups to come apart?
right, because it doesn't just happen. I mean, it
Right.
could, but there's usually something that's driving it. So
Hmm. Yeah.
like, okay, so like one of the things is, and I'm guessing it's probably one of the top ones,
Hmm.
is the somebody is way out to have like they're the over competitive. I want to win,
Hmm.
and I rather win than make sure other people are having fun, and because I want to stomp on everybody and show them how smart I am.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a thing. Like, it's difficult. There are people out there that are, I don't know exactly how to explain it, because frankly, I've never been that competitive. I've never been a competitive person. I'm a big fan of thinking that if you're playing a game, games are to be fun. Games are for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, my thought process is that if you're not having fun with the game because you're much more concerned about winning versus not winning, then that's not fun, and therefore is it really a game? I mean, there's maybe
Right.
some pedantic things that could be said about that particular statement, but I think that kind of ties it down to the point where you're like, look, I if I'm doing this and not enjoying it, then it's kind of not a game, and so I'm not. What am I
Right.
doing?
And,
Because
and
I
and a
could I
group
could
could
I could be
be,
working or something.
and it could be a group that everybody's very competitive. Maybe you're all came together because you like playing in tournaments, and
Hmm.
you like really competing. You want to be kind of cutting edge, and you've got this one friend who's just kind of a friend of your groups, maybe a friend of a friend,
Hmm.
and they're just casual, like like takes Magic of the Gathering.
Sure.
They've got a deck, or maybe they borrow their friend's deck, so they're only kind of partially committed, and they're just there to have fun.
Hmm.
That there can be where everybody's competitive except for one person versus the opposite. But any of those, if there's a wide range of competitiveness, it can sometimes just stress that group out.
Yeah, and that is kind of a that's sort of a going into it, like you want to know that sort of thing too. I mean, I have, Lord knows, I have played Axis and Allies with a friend of mine, some friends of mine who play quite frequently. And
Hmm.
I go in, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see here. First move, I'm going to move these guys over here and produce this. And I will get like two or three of the people that I'm playing with that will just look at me and sort of shake their heads. And I'm like, what? And they're like, no, first turn, you're England, you have to do this and this and this. And I'm like, well, I don't have to. And they're like, that's the way you play the game. That's the best way. And I'm like, well, that's not the way I'm doing it though. Like, I'm not breaking any rules, am I? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. And that can, like, when you play a game that many of the people know very, very well. I was watching a Twitch stream a couple nights ago of a video game of a guy who plays
Hmm.
this video game called Sea of Thieves, made by Microsoft and Rare,
Mm.
and
Yep.
uh, and and it's called Sea of Thieves, and he was trying to steal this chest that these other group of pirates were getting from a mission they were doing. His big thing is he doesn't do the missions; he just likes to steal the chests from other people who do the missions and stuff. And it's called Sea of Thieves, and so it's to be expected.
Right.
But they were doing it wrong. He's such a competitive player. He's like, what are they doing? Why are they going here? And it was really throwing him off, because he's like, okay, to do this mission, you do this, and then you do this, and you do this, and at that point, I'll steal it, and I'll take it away, and it'll be great. And they
Hmm.
weren't like competitive enough to be playing the right way in his comparison, and it was really throwing off his overall jam. So, I mean, that can be the same thing that happens, like I said, with like
Yeah, that
Axis and
kind of reminds
Allies.
me of like poker, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly. It's very difficult as a good poker player, from what I've been told, to play sometimes with a bad poker player, because you don't know what they're doing, and
right,
neither do
they're the wild
they.
card. You're
Exactly.
like,
Yes. Yeah.
why would you don't call on that? You would not call on a 2
Hmm.
and a 8. And they're
Right.
like,
Yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
did. And they're
You're like,
like,
yeah. Exactly.
but that's wrong. And they're like, but I won. And you're like,
Right.
but that's
Exactly.
not how
Yeah.
you play it.
Like, well, that's how I played that hand. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see that kind of thing, and that can be problematic for, if you've got, like in the realm of let's say again, like Warhammer 40,000, the well, a big game that's within tabletop wargaming miniatures. If you play with a group of 4 people and you guys get together
Hmm.
and play all the time, and you play one-on-one games, and if there are 3 competitive players and one person who is just not interested in playing competitively, they like to play a real fluffy list, a real like fun list that they enjoy, and they don't follow
Right.
like normal strategies and things like that. They can get stomped a lot, certainly. They can get
Right.
beat a lot, but there's also plenty of times when they're just going to befuddle the other competitive players, because they're like, why would you do this? That doesn't make any sense. And
Right.
going into those types of games with expectations that are not necessarily all agreed upon by all the players at the early times can cause it can be a stressor for this type of thing, and the over competitiveness can also be a big deal as well.
Hmm.
Another thing that I've had in groups that I've played with before is something that I just kind of refer to as power struggle, and it depends
Okay.
on the game. Sometimes you'll have somebody who's teaching a board game. You're going to sit down.
Hmm.
There's a bunch of you sitting around going to play a board game, and you have this person, and it's their board game, and they're teaching the other players who don't know how to play it. But maybe there's
Yep.
one other person who also knows how to play it, and they're constantly saying, no, that's not right, you got to do it this way, or no, I think that rule, you read it wrong, or whatever. Like, it's a little bit of you've got 2 captains to the boat now, and the rest of the sailors don't know who to pay attention to. You know what I mean? It's that kind of
Right.
like that. I've also been in a situation, this is the one big one for me, is a role-playing game where you
Okay.
have one person who's the GM and another person who frequently GMs and isn't directly trying to GM this game instead, but they keep kind of questioning the GM and sort of pushing the envelope and saying, well, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, like, the idea behind tabletop role playing games is that you kind of have to listen to the GM. They run the world.
Right.
Exactly. And so it's difficult, I think, in a lot of situations to have 2 GMs in the pot. It ruins the broth or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And so that kind of power struggle thing can be troublesome for
Hmm.
many different types of games. In games like wargaming miniatures and stuff like that, it's generally played one on one. So there's no,
Right.
but when there's supposed to be some sort of leader who's kind of running the show, you have to
Yeah.
sort of be able to depend on and understand that there's one leader.
Right. And a lot of
Yeah.
times that kind of when you see that kind of strife, it's usually not even just limited to your group. Like I know like one of the board gaming groups I was in, like two of the people did not like each other outside of
Oh,
the
okay.
group.
That's
And so
problematic. Yeah.
then they were like extra critical and tried to like kind of get people on their side, like, oh yeah, did you see so and so brought that game? Yeah, it's a really stupid game. You should just play the game I brought instead. And then they were
Mm.
always just kind of like they're trying to like compete with the gaming group against each other, and it just it becomes just not fun.
Yeah, and that can be even a larger problem of instead of the power struggle within like who's actually the DM in this game of uh, you know uh, Dungeons and Dragons, it can become a bigger situation of like, well, who is really the, for lack of a better term, alpha gamer?
Yeah, or leader of the group, yeah.
In
Like
our
who's
yeah
gonna
in
decide?
our
Yeah.
club, the very frequently the club has, if it's like more of an officially style club, like maybe there's dues, maybe there's bylaws and stuff like that, like the bigger kind of gaming clubs as opposed to just like
Right.
you and your local gaming group. When it's a big gaming club, there's usually like a president or something like that. You know what I mean? And if this
Mhm.
other person thinks that they should be the president, and then they, yeah, I've been in those types of situations, not real frequently because I haven't been in part of a big gaming club since probably college, but I have seen that kind of issue happen in the past, and it's difficult to fix sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's a little bit easier to kind of fix the previous ones I was talking about when you've got just a group that's together and there's like kind of an odd sort of dynamic between like who's kind of running the show or whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah. And then I think differing agendas and play styles. I think we kind of talked a little bit about that as we sort of
Right, but
tangented away from over competitiveness. But it is also it's an important thing. It's everybody in the group kind of needs to be on the same page about what the overall goal is for the
yeah.
game,
And you're
And I'm
and
not just
yeah,
talking about the winning conditions in the game, but the
right.
overall, yeah.
Yeah, and like, are we having fun in playing board games? Are we just playing board games? Are we, in
Mhm.
between? Because like sometimes the pace can drive people nuts. Like some people,
Oh, yeah.
they're there, they're playing a game. It might take twice as long because they're also chatting in between.
Mhm.
Where others are
Absolutely.
like, no, no, we can talk after we're done playing. Like
Right.
we're focused on the game, focus on your turn. Be thinking about your turn before it's your turn so that your turn goes faster. um,
I've never been a competitive player, like I said, and I've always been felt that the game should be fun. You're playing games for fun. But the game Dominion, which probably a lot of people are kind of familiar with,
mhm,
it's not a board game per se. It's more of a card game, but not collectible cards. It's just a giant box full of tons and tons and tons of cards. That
right.
game is sort of designed so that you have your hand. And the way that I've always felt it should be played is you have your hand of cards, and while your opponents are doing their stuff, you're looking at your hand. So when it comes around to your turn, you go, okay, I'm going to lay down this card, this card, this card. I'm going to take that card. I'm going to discard this. Done. It's
Mhm,
your turn. It should be
right.
pretty quick. But the group that I used to play with that game from time to time, there was also it would all every single time we played with this one particular person, it would come to their turn and they'd be like, "Okay, so you did that, okay." And now they would start to formulate their plan. Like they literally wouldn't even be looking at their cards
Right.
the entire time. They'd
Mhm,
just be watching everybody else and
mhm.
whatever, and doing that, and and pouring themselves a soda. And then when it come to their turn, they'd be like, what should I do? And you're like, and it's just I don't know. It's again, it's differing play styles. It's differing kind of uh, like what are we trying to do here? Are we just having a
Agenda,
nice
yeah.
kind of hang around, or are we trying to actually get the game played and finished? And
Right.
again, that's a difficult thing. It's and it can cause definite stress upon the players, the group, the people
Mhm.
around based off of that.
Right. RPGs, the play style, like, some people were like, "No, I'm gonna do a voice, and I'm gonna
Hmm.
be very into my character, and whether this is the way it should be done or not, I'm gonna do whatever my character would do," and
Right.
it's
Sure.
and then there's other people who are like, "Well, yeah, my character is not very smart, but, I know that if I walk into this alleyway, he's going to get jumped and he might die. Like, so I'm
Hmm.
not going to do it.
So I'm not going to do that, right?
And yeah, those two differing can sometimes come head to head of like who's right. Like,
We
no,
were
you're not just a mindless person. You're playing this character, but you don't have to. And yeah.
Yeah, you and I were in a D&D game where one of the people was playing like a drunken monk,
Hmm.
I believe. Yeah, and that
Yes.
that that monk would he constantly made like the worst possible decisions. Like we would be,
Yes.
like the city guard would come up and start to talk to us, and he would be like, "Okay, I'm going to punch that guy in the face," and you're just like, "Wait a minute, we can talk our ways out of this." And it was always that kind of thing. And I mean, I don't know. Again, that's an
And that's the
agenda
thing. Yeah.
thing
Sometimes,
to some
yeah.
degree.
Sometimes it can rub people the wrong way, and some people are like, "Oh, it's kind of fun because it's just
Sure.
he's the wild card in the game, and it's gonna just always keep things interesting."
We never had a ton of time to play when we were playing those games, so it kind of
Right.
slowed things down for us in general. So there was that. But again, and figuring that out, again, that's an agenda thing as well. Like we only have this amount of time to play, so do we want to try to get as many games in as possible, or are we trying to get just let the time go and see where it goes, or or see how maybe we don't get a game finished at all. If we're playing, like,
Right.
let's say, I don't know, board games, or maybe you're playing Magic or something like that. Understanding all of that stuff is important. So how do you understand that stuff? How do you keep things healthy and kind of bring all that stuff together?
Yeah, so the main thing I swear I hear this on like every single podcast, gaming podcast I listen to, every
Hmm.
relationship podcast, or show,
It's
like
just a
Dr.
keystone to
Phil.
human relationships in general.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
like, and like 99% or 95% of like all like movies and TV shows, if you do one thing, there would
Hmm.
be no drama at all. And that's just
Exactly.
communicate.
Right. Yeah, yeah. How many times have
Like
you been
if
watching a TV show or a movie where you're like, if that guy just would have said this to this person, then this movie would have been half an hour long. You know what I mean?
right.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't, and that is the issue, is that the reason that these things become conflicts in movies and TV shows and things is like that is because there's a lot of people that don't necessarily communicate as well as they should, and then these things have a tendency to these small issues can start to become bigger issues within the
Right, they start to
dynamics of the group
fester.
and club.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Whereas, like the one time the character, they played their character and we got into this, big fight, and I think we kind of screwed up our thing and we didn't get to
Hmm.
do what we wanted to do. Rather than just like kind of like coming out right away and saying it, they're just, they're like, and then the next time that person does anything wrong, they're just like, see, that person just doesn't know what they're doing. And then they build it and they build it and they build it to the point
Hmm.
where they're like, yeah, I can't game with that person because he just doesn't play right. Whereas
Right.
really just
Exactly.
was one little thing that you could have just been like, hey, that didn't go well. That's not really how we're playing. Can you not do that? And then they
Hmm.
could have been like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. And then everything's good.
And frequently that is something, honestly, and it doesn't happen very frequently in gaming groups. But the thing is that is the kind of ground rules that should be laid down ahead of time.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like if you're going to be sitting down to play a game, if you're starting a campaign with a group and you're going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons, let's say, for as an example, because it's a well-known role playing game,
right.
um, ground rules right up front. Are we doing this every 2 weeks? What happens if someone can't show up due to real life issues and things and all kinds of stuff? Like what do we
Hmm.
do? What's the expectation? Like, are we all just going to sit around and not play, or are we like, if you can't make it this week, then you stayed back in the inn because your leg hurt, or is someone else going to drive your character for a while and you're going to be played
Right.
kind of almost as NPC? Like all that kind of stuff is important to know up front, and then also to communicate as well the ground rules of like, we're trying to level our characters, we're really trying to progress,
Hmm.
or are we a group that's really just interested in building a bunch of really interesting and fun story, or are we interested in like fighting monsters, and like what are you looking for, and knowing that stuff up front honestly can help you, because sometimes you be like, right up front you can be like, oh, I see, this group is probably not necessarily interested in what I'm interested in doing, so therefore
Right.
I'm not going to probably be able to play with these folks, and that's fine. We know that up front. We got rid of that stressor. Or the other hand of like, I've always played this way, but you folks all want to try this way, and that sounds okay. I'll give it a try, but knowing up front that this is the way we're all going to play is going to help us all be on the same page.
Right, because now I'm not fighting against the person. I'm fighting against maybe not liking a certain rule that we have. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
the rule is something as simple as no house rules.
Hmm.
No house rules in the game. You play by the book. Whether or not the intention may have been one way or another, whatever the rule says, live or die by the rule. And others ones are like, no, you could like we always go with the intention of the rule. You know what the people are making, and
Sure.
if it comes down to it where we can't agree, we're going to roll die, and 1 through 3, it's your way, and 5 for 6, the other way,
If you
or
make
four,
a
five,
house
six.
rule that says there's no house rules, you have to follow that house rule.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Or you
I
have to
just thought
game an
about that.
apartment.
Right. Yeah. If you live in an apartment, it's totally different. That's a good point.
But yeah,
But
but that could even be part of your ground rules is like how to handle conflict resolution. Like,
mhm.
like
Well,
if
keeping
we really come
people
to
in
like,
check, you know,
yeah, right,
which
like yeah,
leads
and that
back
was
to
like, go ahead.
communication. Yeah, yeah, it leads back to
Right,
communication, where it's a
right,
situation of like, if you're going to start changing the way that we already decided we're going to go with this, we're going to let you know so that you can either decide, okay, well, I guess I agreed to this earlier, but now I've changed my mind, so and you deal with that, or maybe the person doesn't realize that they're going the direction they're not that you guys all have decided not to go. You know what I mean?
right, and
So
yeah,
yeah.
it's like as a GMs, it's usually easier for that role of who's going to be telling that person. Like that's not really the cool way to do it.
Hmm.
I feel like that's kind of one of the big things of a good GM is to kind of like they see somebody that's playing and it's really kind of affecting everyone else to kind of like either bring them aside or just kind of nudge them in the right direction.
Hmm.
Um, and it can
And
be
it's
a
not a
little bit of
punishment
both.
thing. It's a
No, it's kind of just
it's a
like okay, well, yeah, that's not going to work out well, and
going to add
this
some
is why.
direction. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. And keeping people in check like that, again, it's part of communication, because if there's upfront communication, but then when things start to go a little awry, then it's time to kind of rein that back in and be like, look, we kind of all agreed we're going to go this way, and you're kind of doing this, and they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm sorry, I kind of forgot, or I just didn't realize I was going that
Right.
direction, or something like that. It's all super, a good idea. And then sometimes changing the game style to help smooth things out. That's also, again, in RPGs, that can be a definite skill that the DM has. But even
Hmm.
in gaming groups, like I had a guy come in one time. I wasn't I don't work at a shop, but back in the day, especially before COVID, I would hang out at my local shop lately a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And sometimes the owner, who was pretty much the only employee, would be busy talking to another customer, and I'd be standing around or whatever, and someone would come in and they would think that I worked there. And so I would kind of be like, oh yeah, well, I kind of know what this game or that game and whatever.
Hmm.
And the person was like, do you have any cooperative games that play up to 6 players? And I was like, what? And they're like, I need a cooperative game that plays up to 6 players. And I was like, okay, why? And he's like, my gaming club is 6 people, my gaming group, me and my
Yeah.
wife and this other couple and this other couple. And we have to play co op games, because if they're competitive games, then things go sideways. So I was like, I see. You guys all need to be on the same team. Otherwise, it becomes competitive and the feelings get hurt and all that stuff. And then the guy was like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I showed him like, I don't know, Zombicide and stuff like that. And, so changing the style of game, instead of playing games where there's one known winner and then people's noses get out, or like, games like we talked about in the last episode. I talked about playing Munchkin, and how
Hmm.
Munchkin can be one of those games where you can be like, why are you doing this to me? And you're like, well, because it just seemed like it was going to be the best plan for me to
Right.
win. And you're like, but now you're being mean to me. And because you can
Right.
do that kind of stuff that affects other players directly, as opposed to playing
Like
against
risk
the
is
game.
really bad. Like risk could be the bad about it. You're like, why are you picking on me? And like, well, because you're right next to me in the
Yeah,
border
your
and you're not
country's right next
defending
to my
it,
country. Exactly.
and
Yeah.
yours is worth a lot of points. So yeah, I'm gonna keep attacking you, and everyone else is gonna keep attacking you because you kind of picked the one spot that everybody wants.
Right, exactly. So in those situations when those types of kind of personality conflicts can come into play, other people are like, "Hey, we're playing a game and you're playing against me, and so I understand that and we're having a good time and maybe I'll win and maybe you'll win and that's great." Other people don't necessarily take it that way. So in those situations, it is better in many situations to find a game where everyone's playing against the board. You know what I mean? Like that's
Hmm.
kind of I think a good thing for those types of things. I think that if you in wargaming miniatures and stuff like that, if you've got two people who like to play, or if you've got you've got somebody who's like really not into competitive gaming, they will very probably not play with you if that's all you ever want to play. But if you're like,
Right.
well, why don't we try something that's maybe a little bit more story driven, like there's lots of different games out there that are story driven. Like as I mentioned earlier, Zona Alpha has got like a definite kind of story driven thing.
Hmm.
Games like Necromunda, who've got a campaign style play to it, things like that. That can be very attractive to somebody else who's playing. Um, in collectible card games, like I sat down one time to play. Like I'm not interested in playing regular Magic, but I'm kind of interested in playing Commander, otherwise known as
Hmm.
EDH, the Elder Dragon Highlander, something like that. And it's basically a very different way of playing Magic. It uses the same Magic rules, but you've got a 100 card deck, and you've got like you can't have anything doubled except for lands. Everything has to be an individual card and all that kind of stuff, and blah blah blah. But it's very easy to play that game multiplayer, meaning more than just me versus somebody else. It's generally played four players, maybe as many as up to eight. Um, and so I like that style. So that's it's still playing Magic, but it's a different style. The problem was, is I
Right.
sat down at a table at my local shop with seven other players who've been playing Magic for 25 years, and we're all bringing their commander decks that were all basically the nuclear option. So I was just trying to like get some monsters on the table and maybe throw some spells, and they were just like destroying everyone, and so it didn't work out that well. So that was again a ground rule situation that would have been good for me to know up front. So I haven't played with them again, let's just say that.
Right. And then sometimes, like, even if you're playing by the rules, like you guys are playing the same style, maybe you have a disagreement of how a rule, like, there's like maybe there's like a lot of times, like in miniatures or even, board games, there's some kind of event that happens that the rules don't cover. Like,
Sure. Oh yeah.
like, oh, this, my two guys are like within this of each other, he did this and I did this, but now we're not sure like who goes first or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or do we go at the same
Mm-hmm.
time? And the rules are just not clear on it. At that point, make sure you know how you're going to handle stuff like that. Like, is it just going to be a coin toss to solve it? Is it you're going to ask the third person that maybe is the quote unquote expert
T-
in your group?
Tiebreaker judge, yeah, that's true too. I mean, most miniature games have a rule and then they're like, if you and your opponent can't decide, roll a die, which is
Hmm.
basically like flipping a coin. And so, like I said, many of them will do that, and it comes down to how frequently you want to do that. Like if a person is constantly contradicting the rules and say, "Well, I don't think it's like that," and they're just basically hoping for a better die roll or whatever, then that's
Right.
not necessarily a person you probably want to play again. But and that's kind of like the last thing about this is like what do you what if let's say you just can't figure it out, you can't come to terms, right? you
Hmm.
know I
Then
it
yeah, it's time to say goodbye, right? It's
exactly, yeah.
like don't stay together just to stay together. You're not in it for the kids because
Right, exactly.
probably isn't kids, and there might be kids. I don't know,
I don't know if you
but
have a board game baby. I'm not sure how that even works. But yeah, it's important to be open about it and to like just be like, look, we're looking for different things, you and I, or like
right,
you
it's
you
not me,
you
it's you.
right, or it's not you, it's me. You guys
Eh,
all want to play Pathfinder in this fashion, and I am looking to play it in a different way. And so, rather than me try to bend all of you to my will, I'll go elsewhere. And then and that's the way that it can work, especially if you're finding a group that's not necessarily a bunch of friends that you're not, because these are all kind of this last section here is a little bit like suggestions for playing with a gaming group that maybe you're not friends with. You know what I
or
mean?
even if you are friends, like say like you might have like two kind of say groups of friends, and you're
Sure,
like,
sure.
oh, but it'd be really cool if I had all eight of you over at my house once a week
Mm,
to play
mhm.
board games.
Mhm.
But then you realize that those 2 groups just don't get along. And you're just like,
Right.
"Yeah, that was a bad idea." Like, I
Sure.
still wanna be friends with you, and I still wanna be friends with you. I wanna game with both of you, but I don't think we should game together anymore, and we should just have our own separate nights for each group.
Yeah, I mean, I've got gaming groups that I kind of, in previous to COVID, I had like, I'll play this game with these people and this type of game with these people, and those people, like, I like both of them, but they may not see eye to eye in play style. They may not see eye to eye in game type, and that kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
it kind of comes down to you to understand that maybe these two don't work well together. On the other hand, you may have two groups that, like, I know these folks would get along together, and then maybe it becomes a bigger group that becomes something better, something bigger, and that's cool too. But if that's not the case, if this is a group of folks that you're like, you've come across in some fashion, wherever, friends of friends, whatever, and that may become your friends, and then you realize either A, that there's just not a compatibility friend wise there, or maybe they're decent people and you like them, but
You don't
and
like
that's
playing games with
cool,
them.
but you don't like playing even particularly this game. It could be a situation where you're like, "Look, you guys play Dungeons& and Dragons way differently than I like to. That being said, next time you guys wanna get together and play board games, let me know." And then, because board
Yep.
games have a tendency to have a little bit more of a, somewhat subjective, no, objective, rule set. Like,
Mhm.
like you were talking before about, like, well, what happens if this happens? There's nothing for it in the rules. Well done board games rarely have that happen. Whereas role playing games and miniature games, very frequently weird stuff happens that is not covered in the rules because it's almost impossible to cover all the different interactions in the rules.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so it's okay to just be like, look, I'm gonna, because you don't want to. The thing to understand is that you may be having a bad time, and that's one thing. But on the other hand, you having a bad time can also be affecting the other people in the group.
Right, they might be you normally having a good time, but because they know you're not having a good time, they don't want to keep playing either, or they're just not
Right.
having fun because 'cause they're like, "Well, clearly so and so, I know
Hmm.
that I was Risk Legacy,
Hmm.
a lot of us liked it, but one of our gaming group did not like it at all. Just did not
Hmm.
fit his play style. And we just basically all talked about it, and he's like, "Hey, I still want to game with you guys. If you are playing that particular game, that's fine. I'm just probably not going to go those nights,
Hmm.
and you guys can play that. And but if you are playing it, or if you're not playing it, and we're playing something else, let me know what you're playing, and I'll be there."
Like with board gaming groups, that's a very easy. Well, it's a relatively easy thing to do because you can. There's so much variation. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas with like a role playing game in general, like you have a tendency to play a campaign for quite a while. So it's like, hey, you guys call me when you're done with this campaign. Well, I got friends who've been playing the same campaign for a decade. You know what I mean? So
Right.
so that's troublesome. But if it's a situation like with board games, if you're like, hey, we're gonna get together and play, Risk Legacy, and then that one person's just like, cool, I won't be there. But then next week you're like, hey, we're gonna get together and play Catan and Carcassonne and whatever. And then you'd be like, yeah, I'm down for that. That's also like that kind of communication can be helpful. So it's not so like a situation where you're like, well, I have to leave the group because you're going to play this one game one time that I don't like. It's just like, I
Right.
won't be there that night or whatever. Or maybe you'll just hang, and just chit chat with people and I don't know, work on, bring a project, maybe build some miniatures, draw a picture, hang out, whatever,
Hmm.
doom scroll on your phone. Um,
Caricatures of everybody else.
there's a good idea. Yeah. Maybe put some, do some representational dance, something like that to show
Ooh,
like what's going on in the game. That'd be a good, if you're
that
into
would
that.
definitely bring the board group together.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The other thing is also it would if you do fall off that horse, if you do, get into a situation where you're not, you were interested in playing with this group, but now you're not for whatever reason. It's kind of important to try to find something else pretty quickly, I think, because it keeps you involved. It keeps you, I
It
hope,
keeps you,
happy.
yeah, it keeps you from feeling bitter about it too. Of
Right?
like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I had the one gaming group, and now we're not gaming anymore, so gaming just sucks. It's just
Yeah.
no, just move on, and you're gonna start this stuff. Like maybe even like when you guys are talking about why that you're not doing this further, you can go, okay, well, hey, so I like gaming with you. What if we still get together like once a month and play this game?
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
go, in fact, let's do it in 3 weeks on this date. Like getting something on the schedule, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. It's the thing about tabletop gaming is that it's a generally more social gaming environment than say video gaming or
Hmm.
a lot of other types of I don't know, like gambling, like table games like in Vegas and stuff like that. Generally you're not hanging around with those people for years. um and with video gaming, it's you push the multiplayer button, you play a game, and then you're kind of done. When you are sitting across from somebody, even if it's at a tournament, you might not ever play this person again. There's just still a lot more communication that kind of needs to go on.
Right.
Sometimes just goes on unspoken, but it needs to kind of go on so that you can understand that for both of you to have a good time, or the group of you to have a good time, that it is a kind of collaborative effort.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is there. I don't know if this is completely true, but I will say that for a long time I have noticed that sometimes tabletop gamers can be a what's the right word? I don't want to say an explosive bunch, but there can definitely be butting heads at
Dramatic.
the very least. A
Yeah.
dramatic bunch is probably better than explosive. That's probably a good point. Yeah. And so they can be that way. And because there's so much social action or interaction going on in tabletop games, then these are things that we kind of want to think about when we're working with groups and trying to have more fun playing games. I mean, really, at the end of the
Right.
day, that's the total answer. So
Right. Keep your friends, keep playing fun games, but you don't always have to play every game with every friend,
exactly,
or even have to
exactly.
be friends to play games.
That's true too. Yeah, get together, meet new people at conventions, and then become friends. Maybe because if it's a local convention, maybe they live sort of near you, and then
Right. Or there's
that's
people you like
maybe more
gaming with
people.
at the shop, but you're like, yeah, but I don't really have anything in common with them. So outside of that, I'm probably not going to hang out with them. And
Yeah,
that's
and that's
okay.
okay. That's okay too. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for listening to this episode of the Game4 podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player or just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@imgamefore.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.imgamefore.com. That is www.iamgamefore.com. Thanks.
Thanks.